Hello everyone! So for the fifth general principle, waiting moves, patience is a virtue. So tempos are critical in chess of course, but while they are so, one does not always have to rush. At some point, slow moves that improve the position ever so slightly or simply retain the balance, whether it be an advantage or equality, they can be very helpful. Not only can you get to see your opponent's plans if you do a waiting move, for example, whether or not they will castle kingside. You can get to see that if you play a waiting move and see where they will castle. But also, alongside that, the waiting move can also be prophylactic and prevent your opponent's future threats, which sometimes they might not be aware of, which is borrowing from Petrosian a bit. So yeah, waiting moves are very important in chess. So when does this principle not matter a lot or doesn't apply? It doesn't apply when, for example, you're in a highly imbalanced or what I call an initiative-driven position, a position where initiative plays a big role. You should play waiting moves in quiet positions where you are allowed, let's say, to waste a tempo. Basically, the rule I came up with is that should your waiting move be a waste of a tempo, the worst that could happen is that you end up only slightly behind. However, if your waiting move, if it turns out that it's a waste of a tempo and you lose something like a bishop because of that, or you get attacked very heavily, then of course be careful about playing a waiting move, and probably the position isn't one that where playing waiting moves is okay. So the more quiet the position, the quieter the position, the more you are able to play waiting moves. So a good question to ask yourself is, if my move is wrong, could I lose a lot or get far behind if this waiting move is actually not a waiting move and actually the position is initiative driven or something like that. So please keep that in mind. So first associated principle, play non-committal moves or necessary moves before committal ones. Non-committal moves can of course be waiting moves where you don't commit anything and wait for your opponent to make a mistake. So that's how they're associated. Second, always repeat. Moves that you do to repeat the position can be thought of as waiting moves. So I included this here. Third, don't prevent a faulty move or plan. This is a very important principle, by the way. So if you are sure your opponent is going to commit a mistake, insert waiting moves to help them realize their faulty plan. Please see the famous example section. And make sure, however, that you can punish their faulty plan or at least get an advantage due to it. Not that it's faulty just like in your mind and you can't do anything about it over the board. Fourth associated principle, do not hurry. So in the end game, it is very important not to hurry and to sit on the position for a while before capitalizing on the advantages one has. Waiting moves are of course part and parcel of the do not hurry plan. And fifth, accumulate small positional advantages, and the principle of two weaknesses tells you how to go about winning a game. So waiting moves help make sure that you don't immediately capitalize on an error and instead wait for more errors to take place so that you can destroy your opponent's position. Sixth associated principle, sometimes waiting to see where your opponent will castle is necessary. So this is expanded upon further in the importance of the principle, importance scale. So the importance scale of the importance of the principle subsection, which we will go to right now. So for the importance of the principle, on the exception scale, positions in which the principle, this principle applies are not as common as one would think. However, in such positions, the exceptions are few. So if you can play waiting moves, you probably should play them. So this principle should get about a 9 out of 10 on the exception scale. On the importance scale, breaking this principle is usually unlikely to lead to disastrous consequences, but it could at times lead to dire effects. At times, though. For example, when one doesn't play a waiting move to see where their opponent will castle, they might end up castling on the opposite side and get destroyed by a brutal pawn stone, because they didn't wait to see where their opponent will castle, and their opponent was able to launch a quick counterattack. But of course, such situations are rare. Usually, you already know where you should castle, and waiting for your opponent to know where he or they will castle is not really possible. And the worst thing that could happen is that one doesn't realize as big of an advantage as they could have had they applied this principle of waiting for your opponent to make a mistake, or increasing your advantage slowly by using waiting moves, etc. So in terms of the importance of this principle, I'd give this principle a 2 or 3 out of 10 on the importance scale, which is rather low. But remember, principles are very important themselves, so 2 or 3 out of 10, it's not as important as other principles, but still, of course, you should apply it. The game we're about to witness is simply a work of art. It's a very famous game. Not very, but it's a known game. And yeah, Bazman. I am Bazman. He's a genius. Look at what he does here. He plays bishop a8. Okay. Seems like a weird move, but let's move on. Rook ad1, rook fd1 here, king h7. And now look at this. He goes back. Wasting time. Why is he wasting time? Okay, I'll explain. Bazman believes that whatever white does here, he's going to be able to exploit what he does. That's his belief. Now, of course, I mean, this maneuvering thing he did, everyone is incredulous. Everyone can't believe that this is good for black. But maybe it's not so bad. And his opponent really was so annoyed, or just really didn't find anything also. Not just the psychological factor, but also the chess factor. He wasn't finding anything, so he kind of tried to break free at some point, which was incorrect. So let's see what happened. GM Ulf Andersson, by the way, very famous Swedish GM, very strong at endgames, brilliant player as well. But look at what happens here. Look at what happens. Okay, he goes king h2, kind of improving a bit. Bazman again goes for king h7. Still waiting. Still waiting. Still waiting. The bishop comes to b7, then to a8. Still waiting. It's unfathomable. He's waiting. And white is seemingly improving his position. Look at the queen also. It goes back and forth. Crazy. Okay. And he keeps waiting. Even with the knight now, he waits a bit. See, the knight came back to f6. And white is starting to, okay, I'm going to attack you on the king side. Stop wasting so much time. But he's able to trade here. Now white still should have positional advantage, but now look at these pawns. Look quite strange, right? And now slowly but surely, black gets a nice counterattack, and these pawns quite weak. This king, suspicious. So yeah, just move a bit forward and the point will become clear. Already here he might have been able to take, but then takes here is something he didn't want to see. So instead, whoops, not bishop f5. I should delete that. My bad. So instead he plays bishop g4. And now this is defended, but queen h2 check, queen takes h4. And finally, this will be checkmate very soon. So simply astounding game by Bazman. Don't try this at home. But yeah, it's amazing that he was able to do this. He was able to wait for his opponent to make a mistake. So he was of the belief, don't prevent a faulty move or plan, so he used waiting moves for that. So he believed that the faulty move, the faulty plan of white attacking on the king side was really faulty, and he was able to exploit it. So brilliant play again by Mr. Bazman. I think the best example that illustrates this waiting moves concept occurs in a very common line in the Queen's Gambit Declined, which we are seeing right now. c6 and now a3. Now what's the point of a3? Okay, so black at some points wants to play d takes c4 to play b5 and some such, or knight d5, just free up the position a bit. But white, of course, he doesn't want to play something like bishop d3 now. Let's say c6, so or bishop e2 or bishop d3. Both will lead to the same thing. They don't want to do this, and they would have wasted the tempo. So they would have come here, then here. They would have wasted 2 tempos to reach the square on c4. Instead, after a3, if d takes c4 is played, now they can go immediately to c4, which is very important. So that's one reason a3 is played. Also, a3 is a helpful move. It prevents bishop b4. It potentially prepares for the queenside expansion, perhaps some minority attack. So it's a useful move. So a3 is usually played for that purpose. Even rook c1, also you can consider it a high-class waiting move, because again you don't want to play these moves and be met with d takes c4, which will win a tempo on the bishop. So yeah, both very important ideas. So waiting moves are very important, even in the opening, even in opening as common as the Queen's Gambit declined. Alright, so with that guys, I hope you got something out of this video. Waiting moves, yeah, they don't occur so often, but for example in this Queen's Gambit decline, they did occur. They occurred. Yeah, so it's important to keep this concept in mind. Alright guys, take care.